Hello ladies and gentlemen, my name is Mr. TARDIS, and today we're going to be reviewing the finale in Big Finish's 50th anniversary celebration of the Sontarans, and that is Doctor Who Sontarans vs. Rootans in name only. We've talked about the previous ones, Sontarans vs. Rootans, the Battle of Giant's Causeway, starring the 8th Doctor, Kerez and Charlie. We've got the Children of the Future, starring the 3rd Doctor, Sarah Jane and the Brigadier. We've got Born to Die, starring the 6th Doctor and Charlie, and now we have in name only with the War Doctor, in the Time War, of course. And first impressions, I had to do a double take on this cover, because I am just not used to seeing a photorealistic young John Hurt on these Big Finish covers, because I am so used to Claudia Gironi's like watercolour artwork for these covers, which I really like, but it's real life young John Hurt. I was really looking forward to this concluding chapter, mostly because I just love what Big Finish has been doing with the War Doctor in the Time War, specifically the younger War Doctor, played by Jonathan Carley, who has done an incredible job with the War Doctor Begins set, which came to a conclusion a few months back and is now going to be rebooted with the War Doctor Rises later this year as well, which I'm really looking forward to. So this is like a nice little middle chapter for the War Doctor here, with In Name Only starring Jonathan Carley and written by John Dorney. So In Name Only is set in the Time War, and what appears to happen at the beginning of the story is that a Rutan assassinates a bunch of Time Lords on a ship. The High Council of Gallifrey catches wind of this attack, and they think to themselves, okay, we can't have lesser species like the Rutans trying to interfere in the Time War, so what we're going to do is that we're just going to wipe out Ruta 3, the home planet of the Rutans, from existence, from all of time, and that will send a message to the other species, don't mess with Gallifreyans. This idea is proposed by the Time Lord Blacksoul, played by Debbie Corley, who you can see on the cover here, and you get this scene early on where Blacksoul is making her case to the other Time Lords, saying let's wipe out all of Ruta 3 from existence, and I like to imagine it's like Quint in Jaws when he's at the back of that hall and he scratches his nails on the chalkboard to get their attention, and just at the back of the room is the War Doctor, who's like, that's not a good idea. The War Doctor doesn't scratch on the chalkboard, but it's those similar vibes. He's like, I wouldn't do that if I were you. This is a terrible John Hurt impression. Jonathan Carley, I am not your successor. I'm turning down the offer that you definitely would have made. The War Doctor is suspicious, thinking why would the Rutans try and interfere in the Time War when they've got their own battle against the Sontarans, so he goes to investigate. But in the Time War, it's a race against time, as the Doctor has to figure out who was behind this attack on the Time Lords. Was it really the Rutans? He has to figure this out before the Time Lords make their move to wipe out the Rutans from all of history. The War Doctor organises a sit-down face-to-face meeting with a Sontaran commander, played by John Banks. Let's play a clip from Sontarans vs. Rutans in name only.
So, the mighty Doctor, at last. Few of my people have survived such an encounter.
If that's true, they have only themselves to blame.
I expected a great warrior. The truth is somewhat disappointing. My people have long told tales of you. Your appearance would not seem to concur with them.
Appearances can be deceptive. That's rather why I'm here.
The Rutan scum?
The Rutan host. Correct.
Yes. That is an area in which they prove adaptable.
My people just suffered an attack at their hands. Or rather, tendrils.
Your people were attempting to recruit the might of Sontar for their Time War. They wished us to fight at their side.
So that's what they were doing here. Understandable, you've always felt a little left out.
Of the greatest conflict in eternity, how could we not?
And you could hardly join up with the Daleks. They're a little too keen on racial purity to accept an alliance. Though I will admit to feeling a little surprise. I thought my people would never countenance such a collaboration.
In Name Only does a really good job at being a concluding chapter to this quadrilogy of stories, because it does pick up and pay off some of the loose threads that have been strewn about this narrative since the Battle of Giant's Causeway. So if you have been following these monthly releases, rest assured that your patience does get rewarded with a cracking Time War story. Because while we are in the Time War and there are battles and conflicts and big paradoxes and things like that, this is ultimately a story about attempted diplomacy. Supremacy, where the War Doctor is doing everything he can to make sure that the Rutans aren't wiped out from history, and also, conversely, the Sontarans aren't as well, because if it turns out that they were behind the Rutan attack, then Gallifrey will come for them instead, and he doesn't want that. He doesn't want any more bloodshed or collateral damage from this war that ultimately he doesn't really believe in. That's the great conflict with the War Doctor, particularly in these Big Finish releases, where he was forged in fire, he was born in battle, but he detests the whole thing. That's where all the self-loathing comes from. And in this one, in name only, he's given the opportunity to maybe do something right. And what I love about Sontarans versus Rutans in name only is that while the previous releases have given the Doctor a companion, you know, you've had Sarah Jane, you've had Kerez and Charlie over the course of these stories, this one, we do get a companion. The War Doctor's companion is Skoll, played by Dan Starkey, who you may remember from Born to Die. He was the Sontaran cadet from the previous story who helped out the Sixth Doctor, and the events of that story in Born to Die, where you had these Sontaran and Rutan hybrids, those threads get paid off here, and the Doctor's like, oh, this is very similar to what happened several incarnations ago, let's speak to Skoll. And Skoll is his companion for this story, and it's so good. If the War Doctor will not allow himself to have a traditional companion, then it makes perfect sense that he'd have a Sontaran with him. And the way the War Doctor has genuine respect for Skoll over the course of this story, including a really brilliant coda to the story where he just lets out like all of his emotions and how he felt about the whole ordeal. I loved it so much. It was really endearing. And, you know, Dan Starkey does a great job as the Sontaran here. Like, this is not Strax. Skoll is a very different type of character. He's a very unique Sontaran for this context. So yeah, same voice as we've heard from numerous other Sontarans before, but distinctly different character. I can't go too deeply into spoilers in name only. Like I said, there's like a lot of concluding threads that it wraps up from the previous stories, but I do love how all of the messing with history, all of the timey-wimey stuff, and even the actual order of the releases itself, starting with the Battle of Giant's Causeway several months ago, where what started as a series of releases that looked at a different perspective in the Sontaran and Rutan conflict and gave audiences an insight into a conflict that we haven't really seen that much of in the expanded universe, starts unraveling in name only to become a potential cataclysmic universe-ending event. Completely by accident, but because of the nature of the Time War, it could very well happen. This great sense of escalation that's been happening for the past few stories that we didn't even know was happening until this one. Really effective long-term storytelling from David Richardson, who has been the producer of these stories. Jonathan Carley is terrific as usual, but you did not need me to tell you that. And while In Name Only is distinctly its own standalone thing when it comes to the War Doctor, I'm so glad that they did not let the quality slip for this particular installment. My only reservation in recommending Sontarans vs. Rutans In Name Only is because this is definitely a concluding chapter. Like, if you didn't listen to Battle of the Giant's Causeway or Born to Die, you are going to be completely lost. The only installment of this quadrilogy that I would consider to be standalone is The Children of the Future, but that was mainly because it was like so character focused on Sarah Jane and the Brigadier, and the Rutans were like a nice little background detail. Maybe this ties into In Name Only in some way, I don't really recall it being mentioned. But I also don't want you to skip The Children of the Future, because The Children of the Future, along with In Name Only, are my joint favourites of this quadrilogy. Part of me also wishes that they had compiled all of these into one big box set, similar to what they did with the Peladon box set in 2022, where you had 4 stories with different doctors telling one big story about the history of Peladon. I feel like the Sontarans vs. Rutan stories could have done that same thing, if not just to make it a bit cheaper to follow the story. I don't know, maybe in a few months or a few years' time they'll do one big compilation. But personally, I am very happy that with In Name Only, they stuck the landing. This is just a cracker of a story, like I said. Like, if it wasn't for the fact that this is so innately tied into these previous installments, I would have no qualms just recommending this on its own, but it is a concluding chapter, and it is paying off some really good stories like Born to Die. I wasn't so big on the Battle of Giant's Causeway, but this is like an essential chapter in this story now. In my opinion, a pretty weak opening chapter, followed by 3 back-to-back-to-back bangers. The The Sontarans are one of my favourite villains in Doctor Who, and I'm so glad that Big Finish did do this quadrilogy of stories so that we could see a different side to them and also learn more about the Rutans by proxy. So yeah, I would recommend this quadrilogy of releases. I think you have to power through the Battle of Giant's Causeway, but once you do, you are rewarded with some top tier Big Finish. Culminating in an epic and impactful Time War story led by Jonathan Carley, doing an incredible job as per usual. Awesome stuff. Highly recommend it. Love it, love it, love it. So yeah, that was my review of Doctor Who Sontarans vs. Rutans in name only. What did you think of it if you've listened to it? Let me know what you thought of it down in the comment section below. Subscribe for more Doctor Who Big Finish reviews, and folks, I'll see you all next time. Sontar Ha!